Hello everybody, hello. As always, I hope this video finds you well. Going to talk today, this is the other half of the videos about the Ascension process. So I did one a few weeks ago that was talking about the physical effects, or some of the physical effects of this process, and today we're going to talk about some of the non-physical ones, the most common. Okay. Before I start, I just want to say, if you like the video, if you think it would be helpful to other people, if you would like to know when other videos come out in the future, then please do like and share and subscribe. Right, so really what happens, what we're talking about when we're talking about the Ascension process is the raising of our vibration, so that our body is holding far more light. And along with this comes a complete reassessment of reality, of our version of reality, as we come to understand that our reality actually is not just the 3D world that we live in here on Earth, but our soul is far, far more than that, far more than that. And that we actually are multi-dimensional, and that we are existing simultaneously in other places. So as it really is quite a lot for us to take in, and always as human beings, our bodies in a way kind of get there before us, and our minds kind of lag behind. It's very difficult for our minds to adjust. One of the things that happens as we become much more aware of who we really are and the dimensionality of our soul is that, along with awareness of other lives that we have, comes of course trauma and wounding that exist in those other lives, as well as wounding and trauma coming up from this life for us to heal. And this is really to make room for us to hold more light, yeah, and to expand energetically so that we can hold the higher vibration of love. All right. So, but it isn't very pleasant. It's certainly not very pleasant while we're going through it. And there's no point sort of sugarcoating that, really. The other thing that happens is that we can feel very simultaneously a sense of connection, greater connection with others, but also a deeper sense of disconnection as well. They're kind of both happening at the same time. So we'll explore that a little bit. And overall, we find that as we hold more light, we are much more sensitive to energy, all kinds of energy that are around us, whether that be energy within the environment, whether that be the energy that comes from ideologies and emotional energy that passes between ourselves and others. So often we experience this within our relationships, or whether it be energy that we pick up from the physical environment, so the nature around us and so on. It can be all energy, really. We just become super sensitive. So let's just explore some of those sort of one at a time. Part of that shift in our concept of reality comes about because of being much more aware of that energy. So we're more aware of the effect that we have on others and the effect that they have on us. We're more aware of the effect of the things that we read, the things that we watch, the things that we listen to, the conversations that we have. Okay, all of this can be quite overstimulating, really. and can leave us feeling quite overwhelmed. And then in addition to that, as we come into more awareness of other lives that we're living elsewhere and our multidimensionality, okay, then that brings in further energies. So there's a lot going on. And part of that, growing into awareness of our multidimensionality as well, is that the polarity that we experience here on Earth of light and dark energies in all its forms becomes very, very clear to us. Okay, so if you think that we become much more hypersensitive to all energies, but also we experience both the light and dark more acutely, we can see now why we might come to have a sense of both disconnection and connection. Okay, so that we may feel this need to sort of withdraw into ourselves, particularly as we'll talk about later, as we do inner work and work on some of those things that come up to be healed. But also it is really a greater sense of connection, isn't it? So all of this can be very, it's disorientating. It can be confusing. And of course it would be, because when our version of reality is kind of thrown up in the air, if you like, our ego sense of self is challenged, of course. So the ego then steps in, our mindset steps in, because the ego very often resists change, particularly where it senses a threat to our sense of self, our sense of identity. Okay. So, and this is very common when we find that those wounds and those traumas that we have experienced in either this life or other lives, that or our ancestral, and have come down to us through ancestral lines, when they come up, of course, again, the ego is challenged. The ego is challenged, and it's often described as kind of a dark night of the soul. I'm sure many of you have heard that expression. Okay, and it's really, as we said, parts of ourselves that are coming up for that energy to be cleared. Okay, so it's sometimes it's referred to as shadow work. It may most likely actually involve inner child work, but it certainly always involves confronting truths. Okay, so truths about ourselves, and sometimes, alongside that, there's often a kind of exposing of truth about we begin to see truth about the things around us, the people around us, and lots of other truths as well. But importantly, the most important thing is that we're seeing truths about ourselves that are coming up. Okay. In fact, this is something that I know I struggled with myself. That it just sort of, at times, it felt like I was I was no longer able to sort of tolerate a lack of truth. And I kind of went through a period where I had to kind of speak my truth, if you like. And including where I had lacked honesty and truth in my life with others or with myself, I felt a kind of burning need to put that right. So, it's just kind of a intolerance of dishonesty, really. And all of this, of course, comes up to enable us to purge the negative emotions and energy around aspects that need to be healed. But also, part of that is about forgiving ourselves and forgiving others as well, so that we increase. Don't forget that all of this ascension process is bringing us into the energy of love and all facets of love. And it's very difficult to do that if we are holding on to either things that we've done or things that other people have done, but it's any kind of sort of negative experience. Okay, so that's why it's necessary to the process. All right, so it is painful. It's very painful, because, you know, some of the things that come up are deeply traumatic. And when we consider that our soul has had so many lives, or has so many lives, there's a lot in there. There's a lot in there to unpack, isn't there? And in fact, this is an ongoing process, and we'll talk about that nearer the end. But nevertheless, there will be some very key things, some kind of pivotal things, if you like, for us to purge, that are highly relevant to our life in this incarnation. Either energies, as I said, that come through from other lives or along ancestral lines, or the things that have been traumatic for us in this life. And very often, those that embark on or find themselves embarking on a spiritual journey are pushed to do so as a result of a traumatic experience. That's very common too. So we kind of get into a place where we're forced, if you like, to go inwards and explore our sense of self, our inner self, you know, our mental programming, our emotional territory. Yeah. Okay. So yes, so it is about also, you know, the aim is to clear, yes, the energy, but what does that look like? That looks like letting go of old patterns of behavior, okay, old responses, stock responses that we have to particular situations, okay, taking ownership of those responses and our own emotional and mental well-being, letting go of the mental programming that we have, you know, the things that the stories we tell ourselves, the things we believe, old belief patterns that are limiting us. And it's all of this, you know, as we said, is painful, but it's useful to remember that we're clearing energetic blocks so that light energy can flow freely through our bodies, okay, and through our energy fields. And ultimately, as that happens, we can increase our vibration and come into that vibration of love. So the other thing that happens, of course, is that as that vibration increases, things around us change. Things around us change, and this is this feels like the worst timing ever. Because at the same time as we're trying to do all of our inner work, and we've got all of this stuff coming up, and, you know, we're feeling this confusion and disorientation, and we're re-experiencing or remembering trauma and all of this, you know, our vibration is rising as we do that work, and then all breaks loose around us. And why is this? This is because the things around us that no longer match our increased vibration leave. They leave our lives. Now, this can be a bit by bit process, or for some of us, it's a lot in one fell swoop. It really just depends how quickly all of this work takes place. So, but certainly, without a doubt, we're talking about relationships. So our family, our friends, our partners. We're talking about our work, and our jobs, because our aspirations change, yeah, our interests change. We find ourselves with new abilities, and we touched on that earlier, perhaps new psychic abilities, okay, that we're remembering and coming back into. And this all affects the way we want to live our lives, and the way we structure our lives, and the work that we wish to do, potentially, okay? And it can also affect the location of where we live. You know, suddenly many people feel like, I no longer resonate with this place, whether it's a house, whether it's, you know, a county or a state, depending on which country you live, or indeed the country that you live in, you know. So lots of us find that all of these aspects of our lives change, okay? And it can feel as though everything's spinning out of control. Yeah. So everything is beyond our control. And again, of course, our ego likes control. Okay, so the job of the ego, one of the jobs of the ego, is to keep us safe. Yeah. So when things feel like they're out of our control, our ego will step in, you know, and have a response to that. You know, sometimes if we're in an acute state of stress, it can be a fight or flight response, you know, and then we get back to that idea of the disconnection and connection, you know. So we either hang on really tight to something, okay, and we fight for it, we fight to keep it in our lives, or we have a kind of flight response, and we just kind of shut down, you know. Arwen has left the building. And we sort of disengage, you know. And sometimes, you know, it's not always that we feel out of control with everything. Sometimes these changes are initiated by us, you know. So and you know, we sense, we feel, well, that doesn't feel right to me anymore, so I'm going to put in place a plan to you know, change that. But yeah, sometimes there are things that happen to us, and more often than not, that is perhaps if we are holding on too tight, you know, the universe will force us, will force change. Okay, and particularly we see this in relationships. So all this, you know, all this going on can leave us kind of literally on the floor, you know, or stuck in bed. Especially when you think that we also have those physical kind of symptoms, although I don't really like the word symptoms, but the physical effects of this process as well going on, okay? So, yeah, it can leave us kind of on the floor. So we feel periods of depression are very common that arise from a feeling of grief and loss, you know. Fear kicks in, you know, as we said, a sense of stress and worry about the future and so on, again related to the ego stepping in, but certainly a feeling of overwhelm. And another thing that can arise from this is kind of and in some ways, I mentioned this in the physical effects as well, this kind of brain fog, you know, and which brings indecision and a kind of that feeling of kind of a need to check out, if you like. So alongside this, we've touched on that we are having very often sort of spiritual experiences, okay, things that we may not have experienced before. All right, so as our soul remembers who we really are, particularly if we get to the point where we're starting to remember other lives that we have, our third eye is of course as well opening, okay? So we begin to see things differently. We may see auras and energy around us, right? We may develop the clairs, so things like claircognizance, a deep knowing, or clairsentience, that feeling of extreme empathy, you know, where we feel the energy, the emotional energy from others. And clairvoyance, we've already mentioned, where we start to see auras, or we may have visions, particularly of other lives that we have. I was just mentioning a few there. This isn't a video about the clairs, but my point is that we start to have some experiences that we may have never had before. Okay. So it's no wonder, really, is it, that our ego sort of tries to either hold on tight or just think, oh my goodness, this is all kind of too much, So anyway, what can we do? What can we do? All right. So there are always similar things, but it's because they're true. So I've noted down a few. They aren't in any particular order. Okay. But I mean, number one, for me personally, was to learn to stay in your body. All right. So sometimes it can feel as though, especially as we have these spiritual experiences we just talked about, as though we're constantly being pulled off in another direction, especially if we experience our multidimensionality. We're being pulled off, somewhere else all the time. It can be quite difficult to sort of keep your feet on the ground, literally, and stay in our body, stay in this 3D reality that we're in on this planet. Okay, so ground. I remember when this was happening to me, my guide stepped in and they advised that I go and do a shamanic course, because it brings you closer to the planet. Many of those practices bring you closer to the planet, and I did, and it really, really helped. It really did. So but there are lots and lots of, you don't have to do that, but there are lots of ways to ground, and we've talked about them over and over again. Okay, so do watch some of the other videos, particularly the one I did talk about this a lot in the physical effects of Ascension. So yeah, grounding and aligning our physical body and our energetic bodies. Okay, particularly, and this is often overlooked, particularly our heart and our lower chakras. Okay, so to bring those into alignment, you can find many meditations that will help you to do this. Okay. But simply, even just a simple thing of sitting comfortably or lying on the bed and breathing deeply into each and visualizing each of your chakras. Okay, as I said, particularly the lower ones for grounding, and your heart chakra. All right. Good. So the other thing as well, just mentioning around the chakras, is that I find it very helpful to do a lot of work on my solar plexus and my sacral, because it was about staying connected to my own personal power. Okay, and if we bear in mind, we've talked about that we can feel like we're losing our sense of self, we're losing our identity. Actually, we're coming into a greater awareness of our identity. It's the opposite. But as I said, the ego had its own idea of who we are and who we've always been, and when there's a big change to that, it's quite difficult to adapt. So as we come into that, in order to kind of live that new truth, okay, it's important to stay centered in our sense of power. So yes, that work on that sacral chakra, as I said, all the lower chakras, but for me particularly, it was my solar plexus, really, really helps. So the other thing is to flow, is to learn to flow. Okay, so as a person, I found, I was always quite a sort of quite a structured, sort of organised sort of person. Certainly the job that I was doing as a project manager involved that, required that, and also being a mother, a busy working mother, and all of these things. Also my upbringing, I come from a family that it's very structured and very organised, and I found it very, very difficult while all of this was going on to kind of let go and go with the flow. You know, it again, that's a perfect example of the programming that and the beliefs and programming that we hold in our minds. Okay, so we want to try and let go of that, not hang on, as we've said, and also not be attached to the final outcome or even the milestone outcomes, because as we mentioned in the previous video about the physical symptoms, this process often happens in cycles, and thank goodness it does, because it gives us a little space in between to adjust. Yeah, so it often happens in cycles. So when we get to the end of one cycle and we've increased our vibration and we're holding more light than we ever have before, there'll often be a bit of a breather, and our body adjusts to that new vibration. Okay, so what I'm saying is we don't want to be attached to how quickly we get there, or even attached to some of those abilities that we want to develop, that we may have watched about or read about or have friends that are developing and all of that. This is your journey. This is my journey. And we're all individual souls with our own soul journey and purpose. And try to think of it as an exciting thing, because one of the most exciting things is discovering who you are and discovering what your path's going to be, and discovering, how different abilities are going to develop for you, and how life is going to unfold with all of this new information and so on, okay, and new experiences. So try to stay open and not overly attached to, I want it to go this way. I want to be, I don't know, something. I want to be able to read tarot. That's what I'm going to do, and so on. I'm going to be a healer, and I'm going to be a Reiki healer, and that, or a specific modality, and try not to plan too much. Try to, just let it unfold and be a process of discovery, and not be attached to specific outcomes. Okay, it will all become clear. And yes, remember that it is an ongoing journey, and there actually isn't an end point. There isn't an end point. So we're all on our own journey, and it will unfold during the course of this incarnation. It's lovely. That aspect of it is lovely. So let me see, just thinking how far I've got, because I do write notes down, as you know, because otherwise these videos would be even more all over the place than they already are. So yeah, the other thing is not to resist. Okay, we've already mentioned not resisting letting things go out of our lives, but also not resisting doing the work. Okay, so we called it the dark night of the soul. We mentioned doing inner child work. Shadow work was the other expression we used. So not to resist doing that work. Okay, if we do resist, it's going to take longer and it's going to be more painful. It's going to be harder. Okay, so when these things come up, do the work. Do the work. And there are lots of people that can help with that if you're struggling. There's lots of videos you can watch, lots of books you can read. Some of you often ask me if I'd recommend books or people to watch, and I'm always happy to do so. And lots of us that are healers and have been through this process ourselves, that can help you as well on your journey, okay? So stay positive, because as we said, it's often cyclical and it won't always be as intense as it may be right now. Okay. Also remember that it's a positive process overall. Okay, even though it may not always feel like it when we're in that darker place. All right. And we're feeling overwhelmed and it's all coming up, or people are leaving, or we don't know where we're going to live, or what we're going to do for work, or whatever it is, you know, it may not feel like it, but actually ultimately it is a very, very positive process, because it's bringing you into alignment with your true self, So okay, and of course I just wanted to say, actually, on that note, they're going to come in now. Yeah, one of the most beautiful things that comes out of this is meeting our higher self, okay, and meeting our guides, and all. It's a wonderful experience. It's truly enriching. Okay, so the other thing that is important is to take time out. Okay, and I don't mean this in such a structural way as you know, the grounding thing, and doing inner work and all of that. I mean just simply taking time out to self-nurture, to have self-compassion and develop self-love, to share and talk. You know, there is a great spiritual community to do that with, lots of avenues that you can explore that with, but also spending time with our family and friends. You know, being open about what's happening is very important, and also not least for the people that are around us as well, for them to understand. So yeah, take time out, do simple things, you know, do the things that you love doing, because lots about you won't change. You know, lots will, but lots of it won't. I loved playing the piano before I started on this journey. I still love playing the piano. Yeah. I loved reading books, novels, poetry, all of it. I still do, you know. So whatever it is for you, if you love, I don't know, playing tennis, go play tennis. If you love tinkering about with cars in your garage, you know, go do that. Whatever it is. So don't feel that, you know, that you have to throw the baby out with the bathwater or anything like that. You're still you. You're still you in this incarnation. And so it's just spend time having fun. Yeah. And being joyful, finding joy in those things. Okay. So, yeah, I mean, the basics still apply, always apply. Meditation, okay, particularly those where you can, as we said already, work on your chakras, but also get in touch with your higher self, meet your guides. Those are very supportive. When you've met your guides and you're in touch with your higher self, there's a tremendous support through these processes, okay? Also positive affirmations, to build up that self-compassion and self-love, and well, there's manifesting, of course, but that's a whole nother topic. But certainly that can help with our self-talk through this process, which is hugely important to maintain that positivity. Okay, we mentioned joy, and creativity sits alongside that. You know, find creative ways to express yourself creatively. You'll find that ability will increase as well, by the way, that you will become more creative in ways you just didn't expect. So and also exercise and rest, and you know, as always, you know what I say, if you want to sleep, sleep. If you don't want to sleep, don't. But make sure that you do get some gentle exercise, not overdoing it. Don't want to train for a marathon or anything. Your body's going through a lot. Okay, so you know, give it a break. But yeah, exercise. Body needs exercise to be healthy. We all know that. So do that. So yeah, so I hope that's all been helpful, and mainly what I wanted to be was encouraging. All right, so if this is all happening to you, don't be afraid to get in touch. You can find me on Facebook. You can find me, well, my email address is always below these videos, okay? I help a lot of people on their spiritual journeys, and where, you know, wherever they're at individually. There are many other healers, many great, fantastic healers. So find somebody that resonates for you, that you feel drawn to, okay? And that person can vary depending on where you are on your journey. You know, lots of people have helped me. So yeah, don't be afraid to get in touch with them or myself, and seek some help. Get the guidance you need about where you might be on your path and so on, and healing help with that inner work, help with clearing those energies from trauma and wounding. We can all help you with that. So don't be afraid to ask and come and get that help if you feel that you need it. Okay. So listen, lots of love, lots and lots of love. Okay. Sending that to you all. And although it's different for each one of us, of course, as we know, the planet is raising her vibration. So we're all at one stage or another. We're all in it together. All right. So yeah, take care. See you soon.